After 17 years of absence in a foreign land, he finally returned to Korea. Before him lay a scene shrouded in mist with a cold, desolate building standing as a witness to the buried past. This was not just a return, but the beginning of a journey of revenge and uncovering the truth where all painful memories would be unearthed from the very start. Before him were two urns of ashes, the last remains of his parents, Haejeong and Sunyeok. The silence in the funeral hall made time seem to stand still while the pain silently gnawed at his heart. This was not just a farewell, but the start of a vow. Those responsible for this tragedy would have to pay. The young man stood silently before the memorial portrait, his eyes firm but filled with pain. After 17 years, he had returned, not to lament, but to begin a journey of revenge. The cold question slipped out from the smiling lips: what is the value of a life? To him, it was no longer sacred, but merely the beginning of a plan calculated long ago. Fear filled the eyes of the child, a suffocating feeling when caught between life and death, when everything familiar suddenly vanished. The violent storm that night was like a fateful verdict. 17 years ago, at 10:32 p.m., the boy was swept into tragedy in the sea as the giant ship rocked in a lightning bolt that tore through the sky. In the raging sea, the boy panicked, struggling in the freezing water, desperately calling out for his parents in vain, a heart-wrenching scream amidst the fateful storm. Thunder tore through the night sky, lightning flashed across the rain like a foreboding omen of the disaster that had befallen the boy's life. In the torrential rain amidst the dark ocean, the boy helplessly screamed for his parents, his cry echoing through the storm like it was tearing apart his heart, but all that was met was an endless, cold emptiness. Despite the huge waves and the roaring storm, the boy swam frantically in desperation, his eyes gleaming with a desperate determination, as if he would not give up hope of finding his family again as long as he had a breath left. Amidst the white veil of rain, the boy froze upon seeing a dark figure drifting limply ahead. His heart was as if gripped by extreme fear, knowing that this could be a truth he never wanted to face. The boy struggled in the icy water, crying out for his mother in despair as his trembling hand reached out to the familiar hair, a fragile hope amidst the nightmare that was engulfing everything. Within the swirling, violent waters, the boy clung to his mother's lifeless body. Between the darkness and the stormy sky, the pain was evident on his young face as he touched his beloved parent for the last time. Amidst the raging storm, the boy, having just escaped the water, trembled as he clung to the black rock, his panicked and painful eyes gazing towards the dark sky where his family had just vanished forever. A desperate cry tore through the stormy rain. The boy, with eyes full of panic, reached out to grab his mother, but a violent wave suddenly swept in, pulling him away, completely separating him from his loved one in the nightmare of the sea at night. The small body sank gradually into the cold depths of the sea, his eyes still wide with utmost fear, unable to close. The boy struggled in vain in the deep water, as if still holding on to the hope of finding the embrace of his parents who had forever departed. In a moment of life and death, the boy endured the cruel sensation of suffocation. Despite being surrounded by despair, his eyes burst with life. He had to resurface, had to keep living, even if there was only a glimmer of hope left. In the cold, dark heart of the ocean, the boy struggled among the sinking bodies, his small hands reaching up in despair, as if fighting against a cruel fate. Life was now just a faint light above him. Small air bubbles slowly rose in the deep water, drawing the gaze towards the faint light above, where the hope of survival seemed to be fading away. A static frame, yet heavy with emotion, like the last breath dissolving into nothingness. In the dark waters, the boy panicked, swimming among the lifeless bodies floating around him. The light from above shone down, reflecting on his young, fearful face. It seemed he was the only survivor, struggling at the thin line between life and death. In the deep, cold waters, the body of a man drifted silently, his face smeared with blood, still holding a strange smile, as if carrying a secret he never got to reveal. The faint light from the surface only added to the eeriness of this moment. Around the boy were numerous lifeless bodies floating in the dark sea. Blood spread in the cold blue water, creating a scene both tragic and horrifying. Outstretched hands seemed to be grasping at life that had slipped away. The boy opened his eyes wide, frozen in shock as he stared ahead. His eyes were filled with panic and astonishment as he discovered something in the deep water that was beyond anything a child could imagine. The air seemed to freeze, as if his breath was being squeezed out by the revelation. In the cold and dark water, the boy's eyes widened as he saw his parents' bodies sinking, their clothes stained with blood like haunting marks. The harsh reality hit him like an undertow. They were gone. The cry, "Dad! Mom!" was choked back in despair, buried deep beneath the ocean of memories. The boy stretched out his hand in desperation in the cold heart of the ocean, his panic-stricken eyes clinging to a final glimmer of hope amidst the water that was squeezing the life out of him. There were no more calls, just fear and the instinct to survive, driving him toward the distant surface. Just as the boy was about to exhaust his last strength, a man emerged from the rain and the raging waves, grabbed the boy tightly and shouted loudly, "Calm down, Taeha." The intensity in his voice and the firm grip pulled the boy back from the brink of death. In the midst of the fierce storm, the man reassured the boy, his eyes firm and full of life. "Good, you're still moving, aren't you?" Amidst the swirling waves, his voice was a lifeline, pulling Taeha out of fear and despair. Taeha looked up in panic through the pouring rain, his shaking voice calling out in desperation, "Grandpa." The horror was evident in the boy's eyes as his fragile life seemed to be drowning in the stormy sea and sky. Chairman Jin Seok, now 72 years old, despite the rain, wind, and raging sea, clung to hope with determination. In the midst of danger, he raised his head, silently thanking heaven, for at least it seemed that fate had not yet turned its back on them. Amidst the roaring waves, Taeha choked back a scream to his grandfather, tears mixing with rain. He had just seen his parents still underwater. But his grandfather's response was cold and desperate, extinguishing the fragile hope. He knew it was too late to turn back. In the chaotic sea and sky, Jin Seok gripped Taeha's shoulder tightly, his eyes piercing through the rain like a knife. With a gravity he had never shown before, he told his grandson to listen carefully, for what he was about to say would change Taeha's life forever. Taeha was taken aback by his grandfather's words amidst the rushing water. Though his heart was filled with pain, Jin Seok entrusted him with a sacred wish. Taeha was to be the future heir of Cheonggu. In that moment, the fate of a child took a turn toward a path full of challenges and destiny. His grandfather handed Taeha a fountain pen, a small object carrying a great responsibility. It was not just a symbol of inheritance, but also a key to finding the person who could protect him in the future. Lawyer Kim In-soo. Amidst the raging waves, a glimmer of hope was passed on. In the pouring rain, his grandfather tried to convey his final message to Taeha, not to trust anyone and to go to a secret place as soon as he set foot in Korea. But the sentence was cut off by a fateful wave. Taeha could only scream out in panic, "Grandpa." Amidst the raging storm and rising water, Taeha cried out in despair, begging his grandfather to save his parents first. His eyes were filled with tears, staring into the dark water where his parents were still sinking, his young heart shattering with helplessness and fear. Jin Seok silently clenched his fist, his body drenched in water and blood amidst the raging storm. Though his body was severely injured, his eyes still showed determination and deep sorrow as he was forced to make an irreversible decision. Taeha's eyes widened in horror, tears indistinguishable from rainwater. He stammered out a choked, "Grandpa," as if he couldn't believe what was happening before his eyes, a terrible premonition tearing apart his young heart. The boy was stunned, his eyes wide open in despair as he heard the cruel truth. His shaking hand clutched the object his grandfather had left behind, his heart shattered amidst the waves. The loss was no longer a vague fear, it had become a harsh reality beyond salvation. He let go. The final words echoed like a will. "Taeha, you must live, no matter what." Amidst the roaring storm, the warm hand slipped out of reach, leaving the child alone on the cold sea surface with the burden of survival and a future full of hatred. Taeha screamed out in despair amidst the pouring rain as his grandfather's hand slipped out of his grasp. The moment of parting was torn apart by the raging waves and choked sobs, marking the beginning of a child's solitary journey amidst the ocean and a destiny full of loss. Taeha turned back amidst the raging waves, his shaking eyes catching a glimpse of his grandfather, who was slowly sinking into the darkness of the sea. That moment was frozen in time amidst the storm as the two were separated forever in an irredeemable tragedy. A bolt of lightning tore through the pitch-black night sky, illuminating a fateful moment like a declaration of destiny. The thunder boomed like the cry of the earth and sky, witnessing the sacred last words Taeha had just received. Tragedy? willpower, and burden were beginning to be etched deeply into the young boy's fate. The gentle light of dawn seeped through the emerald-green water, casting upon Taeha's innocent face as he drifted silently amidst the vast ocean. The aftermath of the tragedy still lingered at the corners of his eyes, but in this rare moment of peace, the boy who carried his family's last testament had officially embarked on a journey of survival, carrying both pain and hope. He was the sole survivor and the destined heir. Taeha's face now seemed to have let go of everything, the pain of losing his parents, his grandfather's sacrifice, and the storm he had just endured. He lay still in the crystal-clear water, his eyes half-closed as if in a dream, but the tranquility on his face revealed a deep-seated pain. This was not the end, but the beginning of a fate that had been entrusted to him. The boy's eyes slowly opened amidst the dazzling sunlight reflecting off the water. Despite being exhausted and drained, his eyes still shone with life, a faint spark of awareness amidst the tragedy. It was as if his soul had been pulled back from the brink of despair, with his grandfather's final words still echoing in his heart. Taeha, you must live at all costs. Taeha suddenly woke up in the calm sea and sky after the storm, looking around in bewilderment. The debris floating in the azure water brought back memories of the brutal past. Although his body still trembled and his eyes were not yet steady, something unusual caught his sight, making his small heart tighten. A feeling of unease surged once more. An enormous ship loomed before Taeha, the sunlight reflecting off its metallic surface like a witness to a fateful turning point. The clock read 1:51 p.m. in the Gulf of Aden, a milestone marking a moment of life and death on the high seas. Taeha, tiny amidst the turbulent water, opened his eyes wide, looking up at the ship. Hope surged, mixed with lingering fear. A new life was about to begin, but what he had lost would forever be etched in his heart. A ray of light shone through the windswept long hair, revealing the face of a man with an enigmatic smile. His eyes, hidden in the shadows, exuded confidence and calculation. The appearance of this man signaled a new chapter full of turmoil about to unfold in Taeha's life. It was unclear whether he was a savior or a looming danger. Taeha fell hard to the ground, his body still trembling from exhaustion and shock. His eyes opened wide in panic as he suddenly regained consciousness, as if he had just escaped from a prolonged nightmare in the ocean. His soaked clothes, disheveled hair, and rapid breathing reflected the unsubsided horror. A new journey was beginning, but now the young boy was left all alone. Two foreign men in protective gear, holding guns, looked down at Taeha with surprise and curiosity. One of them, a blond man, chuckled lightly, "Oh, the kid's still alive?" Meanwhile, the clear blue sky and the containers in the background painted a clear picture. Taeha had been rescued onto a cargo ship, but this place didn't seem entirely safe. The atmosphere was both relieved and uneasy because from the looks and weapons of these men, things were only just beginning. The blond man immediately turned around and shouted loudly, informing his superior, "Capo. The kid's awake. He's not dead." His eyes widened in a mix of surprise and urgency, signaling that Taeha's survival was unexpected. The clear blue sky in the background contrasted sharply with the chaos they had just experienced, highlighting this moment of life and death. It seemed that Taeha's awakening would trigger new turmoil. As Taeha regained consciousness, he found himself face to face with a tall man holding a gun, making him jump in alertness. A strange but logical thought crossed his mind. Is he Italian? Perhaps because of the man's accent, appearance, or how the others addressed him as capo, a term commonly used in the Italian mafia. A sense of danger loomed, but Taeha tried to remain calm to assess the situation. The blond man turned around again, shouting "Capo" with urgency as if to report something important to their leader. The seriousness in his eyes and voice indicated that the situation had gone beyond expectations, especially since the boy they thought was dead had survived. The atmosphere on the ship's deck was tense, with all eyes focused on Capo, the powerful figure who had yet to reveal himself. A voice boomed from above, "Come here." The man known as Capo had finally spoken. Standing on the ship's crow's nest, he exuded authority and power as if controlling the entire situation from the top. The dazzling sunlight shone down on the deck, but his voice was as cold as steel, leaving no room for hesitation. The encounter was about to begin, and it would not be simple. Taeha sat slumped on the floor, his eyes still dazed and disoriented from the nightmare he had just experienced. One of the two guards, a red-haired man with a tattoo on his neck, bent down and spoke in a tone that was somewhat softer than usual. "Kid, can you understand us?" Meanwhile, the other guard turned his back and sighed in frustration. "Gosh, she's up there again." It seemed that Capo was a special figure who stood apart and controlled everything from a distance. Amidst the unfamiliar atmosphere and strange words, Taeha began to realize that he had fallen into the hands of a completely new and unknown force. A close-up of the red-haired guard revealed a strange tattoo on his neck, a symbol resembling a stylized ship's steering wheel, looking both ancient and menacing. The angled light cast a shadow that divided his face, making his half-smile even more mysterious. The appearance of this tattoo could be a sign that he belonged to a distinct organization, possibly pirates or an armed group with underground power. The boy's face was stern, his sharp eyes gleaming with caution and determination, an expression not typically seen at his age. Despite being soaked and exhausted after the ordeal, he gritted his teeth to remain calm, as if trying to memorize the tattoo on the man's neck. This was a crucial turning point, from a panicked child to someone harboring a will to survive and initial doubts about the world he had been drawn into. Against the bright blue sky, a figure suddenly plummeted from the towering ship's mast. The daring action and extraordinary speed made everything seem frozen in a moment. The woman, whose identity was unclear, had jumped without hesitation, bringing with her a burst of intense and mysterious energy, signaling the arrival of a character who should not be underestimated. This was a moment when the balance could begin to shift. The woman landed on the deck like a black lightning bolt, her knee firmly planted on the ground, her long hair flying wildly with the force of the fall, causing the floor to shake with a loud Kong sound. The boy in front of her froze, his eyes wide with amazement as he stared at the woman who had just descended as if from the sky. Without needing to say a word, her imposing presence and decisive action proved that she was not someone to be taken lightly. A turning point was unfolding before the boy's eyes. The tall woman, with a cold and stern demeanor, leaned down and looked straight at the boy with a mix of suspicion and caution in her eyes. The sea breeze whipped her black vest, causing her long hair to flow like an iron whip against the blue sky. Her question came out like a command. "Kid, how did you get on our ship?" A tone that was both interrogative and warning. Clearly, to her, a mysterious child appearing in the dangerous waters could not be a coincidence. A blond man reported with a naive expression, "Capo, I think this kid doesn't understand us." Immediately, from above, Capo, the powerful woman from earlier, erupted in anger. "Then go find someone who can use body language or someone who can translate." The small commotion on the ship's deck further indicated that the boy was in an unfamiliar environment, where everything was beyond his control. The boy stood silently, his eyes lost and anxious. Sweat trickled down his cheekbones, his blue eyes reflecting unease as he failed to understand what those around him were saying. His expression was both bewildered and cautious, as if trying to guess what would happen next in this unfamiliar and tense situation. The boy trembled as he recounted, a yacht was attacked when it passed by, causing the group of adults to freeze, their eyes turning serious. The woman smiled sharply, confirming, "The kid understands us." Then she leaned down and asked directly, "Where are you from?" The boy looked up, his eyes welling up with tears but remaining resolute. "I'm Korean. When the storm came, people with guns boarded the yacht, killed my parents and grandfather." The woman narrowed her eyes, smiling with a hint of intrigue. "So you fell into the sea and then were brought onto an Italian ship? Our Salerno family's ship?" The boy was taken aback, his eyes wide open, his breath seemingly caught in his throat, unable to respond to the woman's probing question. The group of adults laughed loudly, as if the strange story the boy had just told was nothing more than a joke. The woman emphasized, "And not just anywhere, but right in the Gulf of Aden, the Middle East." The atmosphere suddenly turned peculiar, making the boy feel even more lost among these strangers. The woman drew her sword, the cold metal glinting in her hand. She smiled faintly, saying bluntly, "Sorry, but we don't intend to believe in such an overly coincidental story." The air immediately became tense and threatening. Regina Salerno, the head of the Salerno family's commercial branch, coldly drew her sword, looked down at the boy, and asked, "Hey kid, what reason do we have not to throw you back into the sea?" The boy froze, his eyes wild with fear as he stared at the sword tip pointing directly at his forehead, sweat dripping down in fear and helplessness. His throat constricted, the boy tightened his lips, trying to remain calm on the thin line between life and death. A drop of sweat slowly rolled down his cheek, reflecting the rising fear in his heart. The boy hesitantly held out the fountain pen and whispered, "This was a keepsake my grandfather gave me." The woman was momentarily taken aback. The boy declared confidently, I am the grandson of Chairman Jin Seoko of Chonga Group, Korea, the eldest son of Jin Sunyeok. The boy said, returning me to the group will be more beneficial to you than throwing me into the sea. She was taken aback. Chonga Group? The boy remained silent, his determined gaze meeting the woman's skeptical eyes. Regina ordered urgently, quickly check the news from Korea. The man asked, do you know any other languages? The boy looked puzzled. Huh. The boy replied, yes. Cantonese, English, Japanese, Arabic, Spanish, Hindi. Esperanto. I can speak basic phrases in those languages. Ma'am, here's the news from Korea. The three of them focused intently on the phone screen, their faces tense with a mix of strain and surprise. The woman smiled with great interest, a mysterious spark in her eyes. The woman said sternly, if you can contact someone in Korea, keep this fountain pen. Give it to lawyer Kim In-soo and he will help you. Please contact someone else. Don't contact my family. 1:12 a.m. Seoul, Korea. The man picked up the phone and said, hello? He adjusted his tone and said, since it's international, feel free to speak in English. Regina called and said, have you seen the photo I sent? We're holding the valuable grandson of the group. Should we send him back to Korea? The person in Korea calmly sipped his drink and asked, what do you want? She smiled with satisfaction and made a demand. $10 million. Cash delivery at Russell Trade in the Panama Canal. You have 24 hours. Come in person. I'm busy too, can't waste time talking. If you pay enough, I'll release the person immediately. He put down his glass, coldly picked up the mic, and prepared to give orders. He lowered his voice and counteroffered. $1 million. The man shouted amidst the chaotic party, kill the kid and I'll pay $1 million. He yelled into the phone, kill him within 5 minutes and send me the video. I'll transfer the money immediately. He hesitated, worried. What if I kill him and you don't pay? The villain angrily retorted, you think you can negotiate with me? I can transfer $1 million to you with just 3 clicks. The villain threatened, if you don't kill the kid, I'll expose you as the attackers and pin all the blame on you. He reported back, I've relayed the message. I've contacted the mercenaries around here. Don't worry. The mysterious man sat silently in the darkness, sipping his drink slowly, the fading sunlight casting a cold glow on half his face. The boy stood frozen, his bewildered eyes fixed on the bright phone on the table, surrounded by darkness that felt like a tightening web. The boy's trembling eyes reflected extreme fear as he faced a truth he couldn't bear. The boy muttered softly, his gaze shifting from fear to calmness, as if he had understood the situation he was facing. The woman declared coldly, her eyes sharp as a knife, I've got no more reason to keep you alive. The boy trembled, fell to his knees and begged, please, spare me. The boy stared intently, his voice lowering, do you know what that means? From the start, they planned to kill you to seize power. In my world, this is all too familiar. The boy's shocked and panicked expression as the harsh truth hit him. The group jeered, surrounding the trembling boy in the room, heightening the tense and desperate atmosphere. The boy's legs trembled violently, unable to stand steadily due to extreme fear. The boy gripped the pen tightly, his hand shaking but his eyes burning with determination. A subordinate rushed in, alerting, Capo, we've got an attacker, causing chaos in the room. The subordinate shouted, 3 speedboats and an armed helicopter. All are armed. Armed helicopter? Is it Interpol? No, they're not responding to radio calls. They're ignoring radio calls? Who's crazy enough to do that? She turned back to the child with a cold gaze, her face tense due to the unexpected situation. She gritted her teeth, suspecting that the Korean was searching for the child from the previous call. The boy bravely stabbed the pen into his hand to create an escape opportunity. All 3 were stunned by the boy's bold action. The boy trembled but stood firm, declaring, killing me is pointless now. The woman glared angrily, while the boy clenched his fist, blood dripping from the wound, unwavering. The boy held out his bloody fist with a determined gaze, accept me. As long as I have the power to avenge, I'll be loyal forever. Salerno's tattoo. When did this kid see it? She burst out laughing at the boy's request, her eyes full of contempt. She joyfully ordered a party to be held while the boy stood silently, his hands still bleeding. She asked coldly, her sharp eyes fixed on the boy, who was trembling with his head bowed over the blood on the table. She gazed deeply into his eyes, confirming one last time, "You want the power to avenge, even if it means being stained with blood?" In the heavy downpour, the boy screamed desperately, "Taeha, you must inherit Changgu." The boy clenched his fist, his eyes filled with determination. She smiled, amused by the boy's resistance. She kicked open the door and ordered, "Follow me." From now on, the boy's life belonged to Salerno. Live and die for the family. With her head held high, she faced the armed helicopter, ready to step into battle. Taeha stood frozen on the ship's deck, his eyes wide with shock as he looked up at the sky, blood dripping from his hand. 17 years later, Taeha appeared, mature and confident, with cold eyes and a self-assured smile. No body was found, but this was still the only place for him to pay his respects to the deceased. The young man smiled quietly before the resting place, his eyes reflecting a mix of serenity and deep determination. His eyes suddenly wavered, noticing something unusual in the silence. A car sped towards him in a tense moment as if it wanted to shatter the stillness. A burst of gunfire shattered the rear window and he dodged the bullets by a hair's breadth, his cold eyes filled with killing intent. The hail of bullets tore through the glass wall and the urn, shattering everything and sending shards flying everywhere amidst the deafening explosions. A group of assassins stepped out of a black car, simultaneously aiming their guns and firing without hesitation. One of the assassins, enraged, stamped his foot and cursed his companions for missing the target. Lee Jang-gu, the security manager of the Changgu Group, ordered a search for the CEO. Lee Jang-gu was furious, unable to believe that someone dared to kidnap the CEO of the Changgu Group and expected to survive. A subordinate reported that they had found the suspect's car, just as manager Lee Jang-gu had described. The people from Changgu emphasized, "We must ensure the CEO's absolute safety." A violent explosion destroyed both the car and the surrounding area. Blood splattered behind the manager as one of his subordinates was killed right in front of him. The man in green descended from the sky, swinging his sword with both hands, blood splattering everywhere across the battlefield. The Changgu manager stood stunned, looking down at the deep gash in his abdomen, his face filled with outrage. The manager panicked, realizing that his bulletproof vest couldn't withstand the previous blow. An enraged attacker charged forward, cursing his opponent for being cowardly. The young man turned around coldly and retorted, "It's not your turn to judge." The young man unleashed a powerful spinning kick to his opponent's back, a swift counterattack that caught the enemy off guard. A deadly hook sent blood spraying as the opponent crashed to the ground midair. Empty eyes, blood stained behind. He had realized his impending death. Covered in blood, he stood silently in the night. He had completed his revenge. With a calm expression still stained with blood, his revenge was complete. Leaving the flames behind, he walked away without looking back. He got into the car, the flames and black smoke still swirling behind him. He opened the paper bag, his cold eyes filled with calculation, his cheeks still smeared with dried blood. He stepped out of the car, carrying the paper bag, and walked resolutely across the empty parking lot. The bound man trembled, begging for mercy, while Taeha coldly opened the trunk, his eyes showing no hesitation. Kim In-soo, the former lawyer of Changgu Electronics, frantically justified that he was just following orders. Taeha opened the trunk, revealing a mysterious golden armor inside. Money scattered around the figure amidst desperate screams. $1 million. CEO. He smiled coldly under the light shining on his blood-stained face. The money promised 17 years ago seems to be overdue. The man stuttered in panic. Damn it, $1 million. A cold voice echoed through the microphone. The metal lighter opened with a click, a cold light flickering in the sleeve of his vest. The blue flame reflected on the vest fabric, creating a tense atmosphere before the impending action. The lighter's flame illuminated the frightened man's face, his words revealing a revenge predetermined by the past. He coldly raised his hand, the flame from the lighter surging. The end was near. The lawyer screamed in despair as the flames consumed his body amidst the pile of money. Taeha walked through the burning flames, his expressionless eyes watching his enemy scream in agony. Taeha stood before the burning car, smiling lightly as if he had finally shed his burden. Taeha lit a cigarette, whispering his name and his parents, his eyes filled with a vengeful emotion. Taeha bowed his head, the flame of the lighter whispering, "Sorry for being late." Black smoke swirls up to the sky, ashes fluttering under the sunlight piercing through the clouds, a conclusion both tragic and serene. Taking slow steps among the corpses and smoke, he takes a drag on a cigarette, his eyes calm amidst the bloody hell.